Legends say that Gold D. Roger was born, mustache fully intact. Still, others suggest that Roger, as a child, was once 15 feet tall, in more ways than one, destined to cast a shadow so large that even Eni's lobby could not escape. But that would have been unfair, and he knew it. As Oda has said many times, with great power comes great responsibility. So he shrunk himself, using pure willpower. Now, whether or not you buy into these very truthful legends is truly irrelevant, because Oda is for sure cooking something regarding a flashback nobody really talks about. Roger may have always shat bricks of gold. Certainly, I find the evidence compelling, but Oda has not drawn it yet. This man most definitely has a story that is compelling even before he became king of the pirates. Maybe before he even became a pirate. So today I want to share some more truths and legends that you have never heard before about the man who started it all. So buckle up and apply your tinfoil judiciously. Hey YouTube, Joeboy here. So, a contradiction basically nobody talks about, but I find to be really fascinating is we learn from Whitebeard. Whitebeard tells us Ace is nothing like Roger. But this opinion is not shared by Garp, who reminisces and remarks upon the similarities between father and son in Ace and Luffy's flashback. Dodon even says the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree. Both Garp and Whitebeard knew Roger well, so why was their opinion of Ace so drastically different? Giving this question some thought, I've come to the conclusion that it has to do with the time in which the characters knew Ace. Garp exclusively knew Ace as a child, and as a child, he was just like his father. But Ace didn't stay this way. He changed, and this was the Ace that Whitebeard got to know. It's honestly crazy how meticulous Oda got into the details here, but if you read the Ace, Luffy, and Sabo flashback, you can see some things about Ace that clearly, something had to give. The character trait that Oda wanted to highlight from Ace as a child was that he would never run away. Ace is honestly pretty explicit. I'm gonna be a pirate and win, win, win. I won't run away from anyone. I won't lose to anyone. I don't care if they call me a villain. I'll make the whole world know my name. We see this play out in the flashback, and Ace later explains, not totally sure himself, but he thinks the reason that he can't run away is that Luffy was behind him. Ace acted to protect his friend by defeating his friend's enemy, no matter the odds. And this was exactly what Garp remarked was so similar to Roger. So I think that Roger's story mirrored Ace, but with one great exception. Roger actually did it. He never lost. It would then be one of the greatest ironies in the story that Whitebeard wanted to protect Ace, just the same as he protected every one of his sons. But while doing so, he became the obstacle which prevented Ace from living freely. I believe that Ace would have grown up and been exactly the same as Roger, had Whitebeard not stood in his way. The boy who said that he would never lose did lose, time and time again, until finally his will was broken. I think Ace lost some belief in himself to be able to protect the people that he cared about, and instead entrusted this responsibility to Whitebeard. So unlike Garp, Whitebeard never got to know the Ace that was just like his father, because he beat him out of it. And this also explains Ace's feeling of betrayal when Whitebeard decided not to pursue Teach after betraying the crew and killing Thatch. Perhaps this was the first time in a long time the Ace that was like Roger returned. In his eyes, Whitebeard had a responsibility that he failed to uphold. So Ace, just like Roger, took it upon himself to defeat the enemy of his friends, no matter the odds. And once again, Whitebeard's form of protection failed. While it's true that he had kept Ace safe, he had also prevented Ace from growing. And that growth was necessary for Ace to live as freely as his father, and act in the way that he had always truly desired. I don't know if anybody else has had this thought, but have you ever wondered what would happen if Ace had survived Marineford? I think some people would just assume that the story would be somewhat vanilla. Ace and Luffy, best friends for life, and Ace essentially takes a backseat to Luffy in the greater universe. But I have some serious doubts about that. You can look at this what-if scenario in a couple different ways, but let's begin like this. While Ace had previously decided to make Whitebeard into king, Whitebeard still dies in Marineford, so he's kind of left directionless. Maybe Ace's story ends here anyway, but I tend to think that he more fully inherits Whitebeard's own dreams. Instead of Marco becoming the captain of the Whitebeard Pirates, I think it's intuitive to believe that they nominate Ace to carry on Whitebeard's legacy, because that's almost definitely what Whitebeard actually wanted, and it's also almost definitely what Ace would have wanted. And this sets up Ace for some emotional conflict, because an obvious duty of the captain of the Whitebeard Pirates is just the same as it had been from Whitebeard himself, to protect everybody. The crew was Whitebeard's treasure, and as a pirate, you defend your treasure to the death. But Ace was also Roger's son, and Whitebeard wanted him to inherit his father's title. He wanted Ace to become king. Based on context from Marineford, it's clear that Whitebeard thought Ace was the pirate that Roger was waiting for. Likely the person with the initial D that would change the world. He likely believed this because Roger himself believed it. So the natural progression following Marineford is 1. Ace to inherit Whitebeard's will to become king. And then 2, following his own will to protect his friends, the Whitebeard pirates. To be fulfilled, Ace's end goal would have to include both of these things. And this would straight up resemble Luffy and the Straw Hats. Could Ace survive this? Maybe, maybe not. But if he does, he walks out probably a legitimate Yonko. But it's entirely possible at this point in the story that Ace is already broken. His trajectory to become like his father, it can't be done. You have to rewrite history even further down the timeline, back to when Ace first lost to Whitebeard. That can't have happened. Either way you want to do it, there's a possible future in which Ace and Luffy are rivals, or a possible future in which Ace stands in Luffy's way of becoming king of the pirates, because they can't both be the greatest. Surviving as a pirate in the New World means that you are one of the most ambitious people in the world, with some of the strongest desires that exist. Pirates either take what they want, or they are eliminated. If we live in this alternate timeline where Ace never dies in Marineford or never loses to Whitebeard, I think that Luffy eventually becomes his enemy, and vice versa. It's no different than in Punk Hazard, Luffy stating and believing wholeheartedly that he is destined to defeat all of the Yonko, including his mentor, his hero, Shanks. Although it may be complicated, although they may love and respect each other, one must defeat the other if they really want something for themselves badly enough. As this is true of Luffy and Shanks, it would definitely be true of Luffy and Ace in the universe where both are pursuing the title of king, and neither can back down. I find it fitting that at the conclusion of Marineford, after Ace had died, that was when Oda finally decided to reveal Luffy and Ace's backstory, their connection, history together. It was almost like a card that Oda had hidden up his sleeve the entire time so that we could never really understand the dynamics. Before this, I think that it'd be fair to say that most One Piece fans were like, cool, Luffy has a brother that's a famous pirate on a famous pirate crew. In a way, it legitimizes Luffy more. Connections for days. But the backstory more precisely explains the sinister undertones. There is a reason why they did not set out to the sea together. This is why the Straw Hat Pirates work so well, is everybody has a really strong ambition, a really strong dream, but they can all do it together. Luffy and Ace never could. So after Ace dies is when you finally realize their story was always destined to end in heartbreak. Either they are equals and each prevents the other from becoming the greatest, or one surpasses the other and leave their friend as just another casualty of the Grand Line. Honestly, as I've been reading Kuma's flashback, it's just reminding me that anytime that Oda delves into a character's past, he ramps it up to almost obscene levels. Think about the twists and turns of Oden's flashback, and how much care was put into almost every phase of his life. Son of the Shogun of Wano, prodigy Chad from the moment he was born. Disowned, conquered a fifth of the land of Wano by himself, re-owned, decides he doesn't care, becomes a pirate and ends up joining the two greatest crews of their era. And then after discovering everything that you can possibly discover, comes home and finds there's still more to do. But outside of the absurd amount of detail and creativity, Oda makes sure that in all flashbacks there's something emotional. I would generally classify One Piece as a lighthearted story, but the exception to this rule, the consistent exception, is that in flashbacks, Oda is just like, cracks knuckles, it's time. People are gonna die, and it is going to make you feel things. Honestly, there are so many flashbacks in the story, it's hard to keep track of all of them, so it's possible some things may slip through the cracks, okay? When I'm talking about flashbacks, I'm talking about ones that Oda actually spent like an entire chapter or more on. And I cannot think of a single one that is not emotionally gripping, with heavy-hitting and consequential character dynamics. So let's get to the point, okay? I want to ask you guys a question. Do you think that Oda is going to pour more effort and energy into Oden's flashback than he will for Gold D freaking Roger? You're allowed to have an opinion, but in this case, only one opinion is objectively correct. I think One Piece fans right now have been lulled into a false sense of security, and that Oda has cleverly manipulated us to think that we understand who Gold Roger was and his entire story. But once again, I think that Oda is holding his cards. Everyone agrees with me that we're going to get a complete God Valley flashback at some point in the future, right? That's going to happen. And it'll likely be a chapter or more by itself. But have you guys noticed that something is currently missing? Where's the tragedy? Garp and Roger fighting rocks is hype. It's not emotional. What the Celestial Dragons are doing to the people of God Valley and the slaves is tragic. But it won't ever matter to us unless characters that we care about are involved. And Oda has already revealed that the characters that we care about, Ivankov, Ginny, and Kuma, escaped. And he also revealed how they escaped. Oda has simultaneously revealed that the Roger pirates aren't here because of some personal connection to anybody that was previously on God Valley. They aren't here to free a slave or save a friend. It appears that they are there for the treasure. Fights in One Piece do not get significant screen time outside of our heroes without emotional stakes. So an important ingredient to all flashbacks appears to be missing, but I don't think that it is. The thing that is staring us right in the face, the hidden emotional punch of God Valley, is the future reveal that Roger and Rox were once, or are currently, brothers, just like Ace and Luffy. I think that basically everybody noticed in the God Valley flashback that we got in chapter 1096 that Rox is characterized very similarly to Luffy. Whitebeard yells, "Don't rush ahead," and he calls him an idiot and a moron. Both of these descriptions fit Luffy as a captain perfectly. And as we've already argued, Ace was actually extremely similar to Roger as a child. We've talked about parallels on this channel now forever, so it's time to do so again. Roger and Rock's story mirrors Luffy and Ace. And I actually think that Oda's been explicit about this, with some dialogue that literally everybody has ignored. In Luffy and Ace's flashback, Garp tells us that Roger grew up pretty much the same way that Ace did. Everybody overlooks this, but this is in fact a reveal of Roger's past that most assume does not exist. From this we can gather that at a young age, Roger lost his parents and probably became an orphan. And then from this, just like Ace, he probably found a friend. But this friend wasn't a member of the Roger Pirates. Roger meets Rayleigh much later in life, and Rayleigh was the first member. So it stands to reason that we are missing one of the most important characters in Roger's story. Rox, a fellow D, a little bit younger than him. Their paths eventually separated in the exact same way as Luffy and Ace. They did not set out on their adventure together because they couldn't achieve what they wanted together. But while in the current story, Luffy has been the one to succeed and Ace failed, I think the past was inverted, which if you watch my videos, Oda commonly does. Roger as Ace succeeded, and Rox as Luffy failed. So yeah, let's get out of the dramatic voice here and try and wrap our heads around this. I also want to mention here that the fact that Garp knows what Roger's childhood was like probably implies that Garp was involved in this past as well. I actually think that Garp, Rox, and Roger combined reflect Ace, Luffy, and Sabo. But instead of Garp becoming the third brother, he played the role that Sabo could have. Sabo was a noble. He should have stood against the trash. So I think that Garp was always a frenemy. Perhaps Luffy and Kobe from the beginning of the story can be some kind of foreshadowing. Basically, Garp had different dreams and ambitions to Roger. Simply stated, he wanted to be a Marine. So it was obvious even as they were children that Garp would have to be an enemy to Roger, because Marines fight pirates. Promises tend to be a big thing in the story of One Piece, and my guess is that Garp as a child promised that he would be the one to capture Roger. At the time, an outspoken pirate wannabe. But I'd like to believe that the general dynamics of Luffy and Sabo and Ace are carried over. If you guys reread that flashback, Sabo and Ace were essentially equals, with Ace being slightly better. I think that Roger and Garp were essentially equals, with Roger being slightly better. And the third member of the team, Rox, like Luffy, was significantly worse, and could never defeat either of them. But do you guys see how this immediately elevates God Valley? What are our important characters? Garp, Roger, and Rox. Destinies forever entwined, leading to a moment that always could have happened with Luffy and Ace. And it's even fitting on an additional level. All of these things involving Luffy and Ace and Sabo all occurred during Marineford. And what surrounded this was a lot of hype reveals about lineage and connections. Some people will tell you that these moments were some of their favorite of the entire series. Basically, I don't think that Oda is done establishing how characters are related. I would heavily predict that when we get to the end of the story in the final battle, Oda has been saving additional connections on the level, as Ace is the son of Gold D. Roger and Luffy is the son of Monkey D. Dragon. And this could absolutely be about Roger himself. As we've already said, Ace losing to Whitebeard was a big deal. It probably changed his life forever. If this doesn't occur and Ace continues to win, then he's like Roger. But as we know, Luffy is the one who ends up with this story, continuously winning, getting lucky, defying the odds, all the way to the top. An interesting detail about Rox that I think is going to have a lot of people knee-jerk to disagree with this theory is Rox's crew. The Rox pirates themselves is a very un-Luffy-like crew. They don't seem unified. They don't seem to particularly like each other, nor respect Rox as a captain. And it's suggested that this is ultimately the undoing of Rox in God Valley. Infighting in some way resulted in their defeat. So operating on the assumption that Rox could be some kind of bad future version of Luffy, it has me thinking about what kinds of things could have happened to Luffy. It should be pretty abundantly clear that Rox's original crew did not include characters like Big Mom and Whitebeard. And it begs the question, who did Rox start with? My opinion is incredibly simple. He didn't start with any of them. Whitebeard is not his Zoro or his Rayleigh. I think that the original members of Rox's crew all died, which as a parallel to Luffy and Ace's adventures makes a lot of sense. Because the biggest setback in the entire story for Luffy and the Strats was in Sabaody, where Luffy lost his crew. Whether you believe this or not, I think that it's at least interesting to wonder what would happen to Luffy in the case that he lost his pirate crew, yet he somehow managed to survive. Do you think that Luffy would give up on being a pirate, or would he simply continue to pursue his dreams in a slightly different way? Guys, my very likely to be wrong specific thought about this is an inversion of Marineford. In Marineford, obviously, Luffy went to go rescue Ace, his brother, and in that same arc, Whitebeard died, and essentially, Ace's crew was no more. I think it's possible in a similar scenario, however it is that you specifically want to take it, Roger saved Rox, but was unable to save Rox's crew. Rox may have broken in a way similar to Luffy, but he lived, and eventually began the adventure once again. Yet it didn't stop the fact that Rox, perhaps similar to Luffy, needed people to help him, because he knew that there was things that he could not do. So many years down the road, possibly 10, Rox finds himself on the pirate island Beehive, and it's there that he recruits a crew powerful enough to help him become king. This is accomplished using Davy Back fights. Look guys, Oda dropped all the lore of Davy Back fights in the Foxy arc that everyone skipped, and it was there mentioned specifically in bold clear letters that the pirate island is the original home of Davy Back fights. I know that a lot of you out there are thinking that this idea is absurd. How could Rox have recruited the Rox pirates using Davy Back fights? How could someone like Whitebeard put himself in that situation? But I'm telling you guys, reread the Foxy arc. There, Oda worked so hard to make sure that you understand that this is a thing that at some point was common. Running from a challenge is the greatest shame a pirate can know. The entire point of it is to steal crew members. But before the Foxy arc, we get to see a crew that had its captain taken. If you lose and get taken, you must accept your fate. Frankly guys, I think this is the best explanation for the absurdity of the Rox pirates. In my mind, there is absolutely no chance that Big Mom joined somebody else's crew, even if they had a common objective. We know for a fact that Big Mom already had a pirate crew from the age of 5. At best, she would be an ally, like the attempted Big Mom and Kaido alliance in Wano, not a member. Not if given the choice. I just believe that the Rox pirates as we see them was a relatively new creation, and Rox's reputation as a pirate wasn't even close to Roger, because he got the bad future and lost. Roger, just like Ace could have been, was always better than Rox. The only thing that we need to make this theory legitimate is a reveal that Davy Back fights in Hachinosu weren't just a thing of the distant past. They were prevalent up to 40 years ago. Maybe this is foreshadowing, maybe not, but God Valley occurred 38 years ago, and Foxy, the Davy Back fight guy in the story, is exactly 38 years old. But either way, assuming it to be true, there's so much that this accomplishes narratively. If you've been around the community long enough, you'll know that there is a lot of criticism of the One Piece story, essentially because the Strats always win, which is kind of an absurd complaint, but it does exist. They say that the plot is too convenient for our heroes, but this is precisely the point. The Strats will succeed in accomplishing something that nobody else has for 800 years. Did they always have the potential? Yes. Are they strong? Yes. Is this a collection of some of the most talented individuals on the entire planet? Yes. But at the end of the day, they still needed to get absurdly lucky. Ability is not enough. The absolute best way to convey this is to create a character just like Luffy, and then make his plot not so convenient. And this is also an incredibly effective way to communicate the value of the crew. Because based on the premise of this theory, Rox did not just fail once, he failed twice. The first time he got unlucky. The second time he had the wrong crew. The Strats as they are right now are perfect. Their individual desires and dreams help propel them to greatness individually, but at the same time they all accept Luffy as their leader because it doesn't contradict their ambitions. Rocks assembled a crew that was strong enough, but this strength was not unified and could not be controlled. We'll obviously see once we get to the actual God Valley flashback, but I think that it's likely that Rock's pirates fought themselves to obtain whatever treasure was there. Sengoku tells us point blank that the Rock's pirates killed their own members, and it's fair to assume that this is a big component of what led to their defeat. I think that a lot about this theory works, and I think that it elevates God Valley tremendously. If I'm proposing that Roger and Rocks were once brothers, then God Valley just couldn't have been easy on Roger, and there has to be so much more to that story. In my opinion, what may perhaps have begun as a duel similar to Roger and Whitebeard in Odin's flashback, an intense clash between basically two equal pirate crews that wasn't necessarily mean-spirited, had to have turned tragic. And I think at the very least we should consider whether Roger actually wanted Rocks to die in God Valley. Perhaps it was unexpected. As Rocks' newfound pirate crew began to crumble around him, he decided that his adventure would end there, with his victory or his death. But obviously guys, this is just a theory, but I think that it really works. What is definitely true is that the recent characterization of Rocks is very different from what we began with, and it's definitely a reminder that you should take everything that you hear from the government and the Marines with a grain of salt. Did Rocks potentially attack slaves in God Valley? I think that that's probable, but I'm beginning to doubt that that was actually him. His crew is simply a loose cannon, with, in my opinion, the need for Roger's eventual flashback to have many heavy-hitting moments, especially in God Valley. I think that it makes a lot of sense to speculate what the tragedy could have been. With Ace's similarities to Roger, and now Rocks' apparent similarities to Luffy, it is now logical to relate these stories. Frankly, I think a connection between the two characters now is intuitive, meaning you don't need any evidence, although obviously we have provided some. So yeah guys, I just want to leave this for you to think about. Will it happen? Will it not? You know, obviously in every case, we will find out. But I hope this got your brain cells firing, and you're at least a little bit convinced. But as always, share your thoughts in the comments section below. Remember to check out my books, The Booms, links in the description. If you guys happen to read it, please leave a review. Like the video, subscribe, click the bell to be notified, join the squad. And as always guys, have a wonderful day.